Hi, everyone. Very good evening. It's indeed a pleasure to host you again for Matrix Partners India's signature Tech Talk, Techtonix. We intend to keep this as informal and interactive one like our last one with Mr. Amod Malviya. So request you all to feel free, ask your queries and question to our esteemed panel today. You can raise your hand, you can direct your question to me, or you can put it in the chat box here. Last year, our RBI governor, Shaktikanta Das, stated that India's growth rate is among the fastest in the world, and India's consumer market is a 1 trillion USD opportunity. Over the next 5 years, we will likely to overtake Japan and Germany to become the third largest economy in the world and only behind US and China. Also, as India continues to grow, our GDP per capita is expected to grow from $2,000 today to about $12,000 by 2047. This acceleration in GDP per capita, especially given our large middle class segment, is expected to further accelerate the consumption economy overall. Now, given this massive opportunity, this fourth edition of Techtonix is focused on the consumer internet market and how emerging founders and engineering leaders can think about building scalable technology product to tap this opportunity. With that note, let me introduce you today's panel, Mr. Utkarsh Bhrigubangshi. He's the first chief architect of Flipkart, and over last 12 years, he made this massive scalable consumer internet company. With him, we have our MD, Mr. Rajat Agarwal, who heads our consumer investment as well as our health tech and fintech investment. So with that note, I open up the forum to you all. Over to you, Rajat and Utkarsh.
Thanks, Deblina, and thank you everyone for joining us. Let me kick this off by asking Utkarsh. We were chatting before this that he's one of the first few people who ever joined Flipkart. Right, he spent 13 years at India's largest consumer internet company, and has seen the entire journey, all the ups and downs from early days to big billion day to now when they're part of Walmart and much more. It will be a very different world over there. So Utkarsh, maybe just talk us through your journey a little bit, ups and downs, and from a technology perspective, what were some of the biggest challenges and how you went about dealing with them?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for hosting me. It always is a pleasure interacting with diverse portfolio people and keeping it as live as possible, like Deblina said. Feel free to keep interjecting with your questions and we'll take it up in the momentum. Yeah, so coming back to my journey at Flipkart, yes, I was one of the first ones to join in. When I joined Flipkart, sum total was about 30 odd people, including Sachin Bini, by the way. And when I joined, Sachin and Bini were just about giving up writing code. Sachin was more of a front-end guy, while Bini was more of a back-end guy, looking at supply chain, inventory management, and so on. Just 3 teams, 5, 6 developers each, and so on. Yeah, so from there to where it is come thus far, and not just in terms of the sheer scale and volume that we see around it, but also in terms of the landscape change that has happened through Flipkart's journey in the entire Indian ecosystem, right? It has nurtured, groomed, and probably nudged many other sectors to warm up to technology and scale up massively. So I think it's been a pretty fascinating ride for me. Sachin, when I joined in, right, the only pitch that he could make to make me join in was making a very English-like statement saying that UT is what I get popularly called in Flipkart. So I'll probably use that a lot more. So he said, UT, we are here to create history, right, and be part of history in the making. And I mean, there was nothing else, right, that he could say. And for sure, technology would have a role to play. And let's see, I mean, how the journey would be. But this pitch actually continued to be the binding agent for many of the early joiners till about 14, 15 timeframe when we did our first big billion day and did the second one and so on. And Through that journey, I think, if I look back, this is my 13th year here. I actually feel that I am still graduating from this university called Flipkart. To me, it's like I've attended so many courses here, so many, complex ecosystem that we have tried to nurture, complex problems solved, population scale kind of a journey that we have seen, and a lot of contextual innovations that have happened almost every year. So for me, having straddled this journey, almost every year was as if I have taking up a new course and something to learn out of it, and next year would be something new to learn and look forward to. So probably I'm graduating from Flipkart as with a doctorate in a subject called applied technology, uh, right? So because unless technology comes to the real use to the end consumers, it's not really a technology which is impactful. So I think those are the tricks, tips, and traits here that I've learned a lot more. And yeah, a lot of ups and downs. In the very first one, if you look back and recount, I'm sure many of you would have attempted to buy products during the first Big Billion Day, 2014. It was absolutely unprecedented, right? The only notion that many of the Indian consumers that had around, Big Billion Day kind of a concept was probably akin to a Black Friday sale, which was not seen or observed by many people here in India, right? They might have heard stories or through friends, and maybe there were visuals that they would have seen that there was a long offline queue right outside the stores, right? Just waiting for that door to open and people will just rush in. So imagine that happening in India for the very first time. When things are unprecedented, there's also no science and theories behind it, right? What would be the scale? Will a forecasting model work, right? For example, business told us that prepare for probably about 20x of what the X is on a BAU day at any point of time. And that too for a short-lived minute probably will not sustain, and then it will come back to a stable level. Um, can you guys guess what would that number be? Was it exactly 20x or lower or more than it? Any quick comments on chat? Wild guesses are most welcome, even if you don't know.
Yeah, must have been much, much more.
So the peak of peak was closer to 25-30x, right? And when we said a sharp peak, right, it is just for a smaller minute. But when 25x, 30x lasts for a longer time, probably for 30-40 minutes, then your systems are bound to crumble, right? So that way, yes, when things are unforeseen, unprecedented, how can you still do an open heart surgery, so to say? And probably we were the first ones to try it out with a software system, right? Things were crumbling. 1 in 3 requests were failing. We completely did not go down, right? So Flipkart was live all the time. People could shop, but maybe 1 in 3 clicks, probably you'd see something like, oops, something went wrong, please try again, and so on, right? So since we set a very high bar for ourselves, obviously we took it to heart and came back, and the biggest learning that was from that Big Billion Day was that it's not just the here and now problem statement, but the journey towards solving it, right? The preparation phase, the design phase is sometimes a lot more important than how you execute on it, right? So that thinking time is very, very important. And the next Big Billion Day, we just turn it around. The scale was even more amplified, right? And we also could understand the ecosystem play, right? Just to give you that perspective, many of you guys who might have attempted booking Tatkal tickets on IRCTC, etc., you would very well know at what time the Tatkal tickets used to open. Sharp at 8 a.m. Right? And Big Billion Day, what did we announce? 8 a.m. So all of this was not thought through, by the way, right? So we did not understand the ecosystem play. So when Big Billion Day is also getting launched at 8 a.m., ICTC tickets are getting sold at 8 a.m. Where does the infrastructure crumble, right? The internet fabric of India, the payment gateways, all of it will start crumbling. And we did not factor that in. We were more intrinsically prepared, but extrinsic factors we were not factoring in, right? So those were the elements, right, that we started thinking about. And Also, because we did not have a very sharp forecasting model as to how much inventory will get sold, how much should we be prepared for, what would be the customer buying traction, we did not have a recipe for shutting down the shop. In an offline shop, it's pretty easy, right? Once the inventory is gone off, you can just pull down the shutter physically, right? And just announce, okay, guys, all the item is over, you can go back. But what do you do on a live website? It will be pretty sad state, so to say, if we just put a static banner on Flipkart website saying that, okay, we are all sold out, come back again tomorrow, right? And that would be the worst brute force way, and I'm sure we would not have survived beyond that. People will lose the trust and not come back. So we, as soon as we started seeing that inventory is fast depleting, the sale was announced to be 12 hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. By 3 p.m. we started seeing multiple inventories going out of the window. So that's when we got into a war room kind of a scenario, and say, how do we now think about on the fly, right, to problem solve and set the shop a bit gracefully. So all these kind of things, probably prepared us for the long run. So for me, that inflection point of 2014 is very, very important. I would say it was a very compressed learning, the learning that many corporates tend to have over multiple years, multiple iterations of developing technology and nurturing platforms. We got that compressed learning within 40 minutes, right? And that learning, if you sharply incorporate back, then there is no looking back, and you can churn and iterate a lot more swifter and a lot more sharper, right? The contextual learning, is just there for you to just piggyback on. So I think, yeah, so those kind of things is how I say that, Flipkart has been a virtual university for me. Many such road trips on the way, right? Not just the Big Billion Day, which obviously is always going to be a spike. Even in this day and era, every Big Billion Day is like a big mega event. While we put our thinking caps on, nervous faces, and almost like, by the way, on call as a term was derived from, the hospital industry, where, doctors have to be on call to come urgently and save lives. For us, on call is of different kind, right? Be on the standby when systems can break, and, just open up, whatever malfunction is happening, and, stitch it on the fly without customers potentially, noticing it. So Big Billion Days continue to be that kind of a story, but along the way, what kind of innovations helped us, multiple things around productivity, efficiency, extracting the juice out of our systems, thinking about balancing the business agility, alongside the robustness of platforms, right? So if you understand the DNA of Flipkart, we are very aggressive. All executives that I've seen in my entire lifetime of Flipkart were equally aggressive, whether it's Sachin, Bini, Kalyan now, and so on. They would push us, saying that, I want this feature tomorrow, right? And tomorrow is semantically that, as soon as possible. And if you keep doing that, how do you do the balancing act of, platforms being pretty robust and, absorbing these newer capabilities while not crumbling, right? So that art and science of how do you work with these kind of technological systems are probably, in a nutshell, the biggest and sharpest learning, which you never get to learn from books. So yeah, probably, with that, Rajat, any question that you want to have?
No, that's super awesome. So, I was wondering that from a technology perspective, and this is very pertinent today, we get so many pitches and founders come to pitch to us where, technology is going to be the core differentiator of what they're trying to do. Some of us invest, some of us don't, but often it turns out technology is not really a differentiator. It ends up becoming a trading business or a simple brand that's being sold online on Shopify stores. So as technology leaders, how do you think about this? Right? When is technology a differentiator versus when it's not? Because I'm sure, in the same situation, it could be both, right? Where you could actually build it out in a way that it really is. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think I tend to try to give some kind of an identity definition to companies which are starting up, right? There is a startup phase where you probably are going to just dabble with ideas, right? You might have a slight inkling of an idea you would want to iterate, you want to sharpen it, right, and see what is feasible and what potentially has a say in the market. And only after you have fleshed out the idea is when you start thinking about the Lego building blocks, where technology has to be one of the important Lego building block in the world of today. Now, in doing so, it's not just differentiator. Technology not necessarily is always a differentiator. Technology has a definitive role to play. No doubts on that. And that's where the trick lies, right? When you're starting up and when you have an idea in hand, you need to understand absolutely crisply what role technology has to play. Is it going to be a key enabler? Which means I have the business model sorted out. I know, where all the loose ends need to be tied through, and technology will just come and make that play repeatable and sustainable, right, by just automating it, right? Which means it's just an enabler, may not differentiate. Which means tomorrow if someone else comes in, maybe they can just think about using technology to just enable, automate, systemize, and it's just a codification, right? And there might be a starter problem, there might be an incubation period, but anyone can duplicate that idea. In that sense, it's just an enabler. But beyond that, uh, technology serves to be uh, playing a different role at different spectrum. It can be a scaler. For example, you have already reached that critical mass, and you want to go from X to 5X, right? 5X to 20X and 20X to 100X. You cannot think about scaling in that kind of a step jump manner without the leverage of technology, right? So when you're looking for greater reach towards consumers, the length and breadth of it, when you are trying to get more traffic onto your platform, when you are increasing your product portfolio and so on, right? Then scalability is that concept that comes into play. So start off from technology being an enabler, and then leverage technology to scale it up, right? And what role technology is going to play. It's just not a jargon that's put on a pitch deck and and people get bought into it, right? They should be able to explain to any one of us that this is how technology is going to help them in the journey. Differentiator or disruptor kind of words are where the depth indexation comes in. Right today, if you look around, personally, I feel, having witnessed almost 20 years in this industry, maybe the last 2-3 years have been most disruptive, right? The technology has come to the forefront in very different ways, right? Many assumptions are getting broken. New paradigm shifts are coming up, and today when we talk about open AI, chat GPT kind of a construct, all of these constructs probably at one point, probably 2 years back in one of the panel discussions, we were talking about this concept called digital twin, right? Today it's a reality. When we are talking about co-pilots, it's nothing more than in some shape and form, it's a digital twin, right? So the things that were a jargon has now is now realized. We are humanizing technology in many ways, right? So technology is changing colors very rapidly in the world of today. New paradigms are coming in. There is a blending of augmented and virtual reality already as we speak, right? So the plethora of ideas and the way business unlocking can happen, right? Is today, in a space which is a very good sweet spot, right? So when we start tapping into that kind of a leverage, it's almost like intrinsically technology is showing you a new business line. That's where words like differentiation and disruption comes into play. So technology has all this kind of spectrum to contribute towards, right? And if anyone comes to me or you, I would first, have a half an hour chat about, okay, can you just explain to me, how is technology helping you out? And if I can get that crisp answer, and it may not be a binary answer, it may be a journey that the person shows me, right? Theoretically speaking, this is how technology will play a role in the different gradients of how business, matures. Then probably the person has thought through, and that's to me is how you start leveraging technology fully, because you understand technology in and out. It's not just pick something from a window shopping experience, get it into your home, light it up, and things will magically light up, right? That's not how technology plays out.
Yeah. In
Very
that
well.
context, Udi, there is an audience question about blockchain and e-commerce and supply chain. Are you seeing any of that? Are you implementing any of that at Flipkart?
Yeah, see, blockchain probably is one of those technologies which has not sharply turned the industry around. right? There are interesting facets of blockchain which are getting adopted more so in a financial world, because the entire concept of distributed ledgers and non-reproducibility and so on, right? Those kind of constructs have helped more so in the financial industry, and crypto being one of the examples. But in the traditional world, right, it has not seen as much disruption. There are multiple reasons to it. The question here pertinently is more about supply chain. I'll tell you theoretically where it can play a role. Supply chain is still, always going to be a bit fragmented and heterogeneous. Flipkart does control a lot of its supply chain end to end. We have our own supply chain, which is automated and technology enabled. Um, but there might be enough areas because there's an ecosystem play, right? I might even partner with the, let's say, Indian postal system and say that, for one delivery to a single individual in a village far off, right? Do I need to have that kind of an outreach, or can I just integrate with any of these ecosystem partners like even Indian postal system? Because the way they work as efficiently as possible in these remote locales, probably none of the technologies can also solve it, right? Imagine an address which says, come to this gully and there is this pan ka shop may ask this pan wala, and he will be able to guide you. And these kind of addresses we still see in Flipkart, by the way, right? So it's not always the structured addresses. People give narratives to reach them. So in this kind of a fabrication, if you start thinking about supply chain and blockchain interplay, when it is going to be a bit heterogeneous, right? You want certain trust element, you want a sense of governance and control, right? And in that sense, you want authenticity of every transaction that happens in this leg. If I hand it over to a supply chain partner and that person hands it over to some other person, right? So there is a leg race going on. If we can bring in this kind of accountability, which is digital in nature, right? Blockchain, where it fails, and people have done a shallow copy of blockchain, by the way, right? Shallow copy would mean something like, okay, whenever there is a handshake, someone will physically attest it, and then that digital copy gets into the blockchain ledger. That, for me, whenever manual intervention comes in, that is the point where things may not be authentic, right? I can fudge it. So unless we reach a point where each and every node can be digitized and almost systemically just inject itself into the blockchain network, things will not be as picture perfect as we think it would be, right? So because these kind of end-to-end digitizations and automations have not even probably gone as deep, right? Especially in the supply chain world, blockchain has still not seen as much of a success, and it also comes as a heavy cost, right? Blockchain infrastructure is not a low cost infrastructure. There are so many so many compute firepower that you need, and if you are, let's say, trying to put in that much of a compute power to ensure that the customer is absolutely sure that this radish that I'm sending him home is pure, fresh, and coming from this farmland, right? Will that be a good business ROI? Right? Maybe it doesn't work for radish or milk. It might work for, I mean, there are industries which have cracked blockchain, by the way, right? For example, salmon, right? There are certain sushi master chefs in Japan who actually claim, and these are very upscale, high scale kind of restaurants, where they want to give it to the consumer that this salmon comes absolutely from the freshest of water, from the best of fisheries and so on, right? So at the point where the fish is caught, its photo is taken in a cold storage chain, it goes in an optimal temperature, and there are IoT sensors in those cold containers, which ensure that there is no deviation from the ideal temperatures, right? And all of it is digitally getting recorded and ledgerized. And by the time it reaches the restaurant, there is a good foolproof way of saying that, yes, this is authentic and this is how it was supposed to be, right? In those kind of cases, because it's an upscale restaurant and people are paying super premium for it, maybe they are paying, probably $1,000 for a single dish, right? In those cases, there is a definite ROI. But in a normal case, it is still to be proven. So there are two factors that will contribute to its success. One is complete end-to-end digitization of supply chain network. A lot of automations need to happen. Second is let blockchain do the talking with a lower cost, right, with commodity hardware and so on. If these two come together, then yes, supply chain definitely has a say in influencing the the blockchain has a say in influencing the supply chain of tomorrow. And I would be probably pitching for it very soon to be disrupted.
Got it. Sounds good. Yudi, you were also the early. You started the platform journey for Flipkart, right? Or you were the first team to just get that platform team going. So tell us more about what is really platformization, right? It's again one of those terms which is often thrown around.
Yeah.
So tell us more about it and what does it take to truly build a real platform?
Right. Yeah. So see, any one of you who is running a startup or planning to start one, you do not start thinking about platform from day one. Right. Day one is more about, okay, I have an idea. I want to do a quick experiment. I want to do a quick growth hack, right? And try to establish the feasibility of the idea, validate whether this idea is workable and has the right ROI to the intended purpose, right? In doing so, you don't need platforms. You need nimbleness. You need the right leverage of technology that probably is already out there and is good enough just to complete that POC, right? There are open sources out there which you can leverage and build upon. There are cloud native services that you can build upon. So just focus on that one idea and systemizing it. Rest of the ecosystem players are already out there, right? And work with it. Once you know that the idea is workable, feasible, that's when you start putting a foundation and start thinking about growing your business. In the very few years, early years, what you would be investing on is thinking about, okay, what features to build, and how quickly you get to market, and keep on validating how all of it lands. In doing so, probably you need some engineers on the floor, people who understand the business and operational part of it. Convert it into an ask and engineers can codify it and very quickly, right? Because that momentum is really important at that stage. So if I use that word, instead of platforms at that point, you are talking features. Can you build this feature out, right? And technology is just enabling you systemize it, codify it, nothing more than that, right? And once you have evolved and iterated a bit around it, features will soon start transforming themselves into capabilities. That they are these coherent set of features, which to me is beginning to look like a well-groomed capability, right? And as soon as you start using that jargon on the floor, that is the time or first time when platform kind of a keyword should be around you. Anything earlier than that will be too early and a commitment into it, and you might lose your momentum. You might get digressed into some of the operational overheads around seeding and managing platforms. And too late in the curve will also be a time when you might have gone past, and you might be in a stage where you have become so feature rich and you have become so transactional that you're not able to step back and think about capabilities, right? So there is that sweet spot, right? And sometimes it's just a science that art and science of it, that when you start hearing these words around you, these nouns, verbs of, oh, let me do build this capability out, and so on, right? That's the first sniff test. And coming back to platforms, right, as I said, one part of it is it's a coherent set of features which come together, and there is a definite value proposition, that set of capabilities that will get objectified. You start thinking about, who are we designing these capabilities for? What is the end persona that will consume it? What are the scenarios that will be powered through that set of capabilities? What are the vocabularies that will be used? Right? Vocabularies are, not everything has come in from just English language, right? If you talk about supply chain, we talk about network, we talk about warehouses, we talk about inwarding, outwarding, storage, inventory. So these are keywords, right? These are nouns and verbs. All right. So what is the vocabulary, and is this vocabulary already well established? If I start talking to the end consumer of that capability, what is the vocabulary that person will relate to? right? When you start talking this in a very logical sense, that is what helps influence the platform, right? That this platform will, give out these kind of capabilities and in this kind of a language, right? And then you start going inwards. So till this point, I'm not talking about any engineer coming into the play. Engineers will not talk this language. And hence, at this stage, you start thinking about a role player called product manager. Product manager absorbs business requirements, understands all plethora features coming in, coherently bundles it together, understands the use cases, understand the end consumption patterns, comes up with this vocabulary and these logical entities, so to say. And then using this kind of a fabrication, engineers step up, architects step up and say, okay, now I understand it. Let me now convert it into a platform which will meet these kind of functional requirements. And incidentally, if they will also start asking questions about scale, how many users will use it, right? What will be the trajectory of growth from here on? Year on year, how many customers will come in? What kind of data growth stories will come in? How are you planning to save this business? And sometimes what I practice on the ground is what next, until product managers give up and say, I don't have an answer, right? Okay, because the product managers will say, okay, this is what we want you to build out. Then I say, okay, after this, what? Then probably he'll extrapolate and talk about maybe this is what we can do, and keep on doing it until he says, okay, UT, I don't have any further answers. This is good enough for now, right? Which means I'm forcing that product manager to be a visionary. And if I get a visionary outlook from a product manager and I incorporate it into my platform thinking, I'm beginning to create platforms for the future, right? So that's the platform essence of it. It's a coherent set of capabilities. It needs to be a bit future ready. It needs to understand the sharper value proposition that it is being designed for, sharpen the vocabulary, consumption patterns, and all of it, right? And also take care of the growth stories of it. So this is where it all starts. There are more complications that will come in, but at a much later point of time, where we start talking about, okay, there is so much churn, there are so many debts that I'm accumulating because there is a constant pressure between go to market and doing the right way, right? And this is a tussle that probably we have seen a lot more in Flipkart, because we always want to be as aggressive as possible, land it very quickly. So ideally, if someone asks me, and this is the story of, let's say, grocery in Flipkart, we launched grocery in 6 to 8 months. And if you think about grocery as fundamentally differentiated supply chain, differentiated end user experience, and so on, 6 to 8 months is almost unthinkable, right? But, in doing so, we did launch it, deliver the right value proposition to the end consumer. But internally speaking, we would have taken certain debts which we would want to repay. And if you are not indexed on repayment, it's like a loan default, right? Someday it will come back and bite you. And that's how debts are always, right? In any way. So that balancing act is also part of platformization story. Once you understand the true essence of platforms, after a certain scale and complexity, you also need to understand the we all know these terms: continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD, right? In Flipkart, I tend to use one more jargon: continuous platformization. If you cannot index on continuous platformization, there'll be a stop and start. Some fine day you'll feel that, okay, platform is at its breaking point, too many debts accumulated, and you'll bring the business to a standstill. And only when you have overcome that deficit is when business can accelerate beyond it, right? And that's never a story that will fly for a business line like Flipkart that is continuously innovating and scaling up.
Got it. Yeah, this is very helpful, Luti. 2, 3 other controversial topics. Chat GPT for commerce. What is there was some audience question around that. What do you think that will happen? And I had one question around the Elon Musk way of doing things.
So chat GPT, see, there is no escaping from it, right? Any one of us, I've seen, different kind of personalities molding themselves to absorb chat GPT. There are product managers who are beginning to ask, chat GPT for, what are the elements to write in a product note, if this is the domain. And just to understand the domain length and breadth and depth of the domain, right? They would probably enter into that conversation style. So people are already using ChatGPT as a sounding board. Some people are using it almost like a co-pilot that, this is the code that I have written. Can you find bugs in it? All right. And I may go ahead and say that, okay, this is the blog that I'm writing. Can you sharpen it? So people are already using it as co-pilot in individual capacity, and hence I'm sure corporates cannot shy away from it. Whatever your business model is, ChatGPT kind of a construct has to augment and even amplify some of the ways of working around you. And let's say if it becomes so user friendly, right? My kids have actually, and that's the fearful part of the story, my kids have started asking homework questions to ChatGPT, right? So which is a dreadful story that, are they, giving up too early on thinking through and let ChatGPT take over, right? But if it really is set up for being in and around us, right, then sooner or later we can't not talk about a situation where end customers want to almost chat with Flipkart on what they want to do, right? This is my intent, and they will probably do storytelling. It is my kid's birthday, this is the age, these are his liking, disliking, can you suggest something that I can buy for him, and so on, right? It's almost like you are talking to a shopkeeper, and this shopkeeper is a lot more educated because he's talking about millions of products behind the scenes, right? That data crunching a normal shopkeeper can't do, right? So that power at some point has to be unleashed, right? And that probably are some of the indicative examples of where e-commerce, chat GPT, etc. might have a cross, right? And I'm sure there are many more portfolios which will open up, not just e-commerce, but rest of the world too.
So on this point of chat GPT or LLMs actually writing code, what's likely to happen to the tech industry, and are we going to see more of Elon Musk style, very few engineers actually delivering a fantastic product outcome, or what's likely to happen?
Yeah, and see, it's not very I would say it's not a style that you probably are not practicing, right? If I talk about most companies which have probably tons of developers in their regime, if I break it down, are all developers equal, right? And are all developers? I mean, if I qualify how developers work, there are certain developers through their trait, they just love writing code, right? Churn out tons and tons of code. Some developers will be smart developers. They'll do more thinking time, and at the end of it, come back and write small, crisp, beautiful piece of code. And also in terms of personality traits, right? There are certain employees, I'm just generalizing it, right? Not just developer, there are employees who probably take it as a day job, right? They come in, they do their work really well, and exit from it, right? But there are employees who actually become almost like entrepreneurs, co-entrepreneurs. They are part of the vision statement, right? They co-own the vision statement and amplify their work around it. So in every company which is growing up, probably there are about 10-20% of the people who contribute almost like a co-owner of a vision, an idea. There are probably 30-40-50% of people who churn a lot of good code, quality code, and contribute immensely that way. There are other people who probably contribute by sharper code, depth-oriented code, which is sharp and spiky rather than volumetric. So if I slice and dice all of these personas, I actually believe that if we start realizing it and acknowledging it, right, then it's not far away from what probably Elon Musk is doing. He's saying that I understand this breed, I understand what is happening on the ground. Let me then codify it, let me absorb it and acknowledge it, and then work, in a more productive and effective way around it. So if, today we are talking about co-pilots, right? And by the way, ChatGPT is not like something magical or genie lamp that has come in. It is still feeding out of all the code that our developers have written. So you cannot take away that role from the developers. Developers continue to, I mean, human brain is just too magical, right? And all of these models are just feeding out of that brain. So developers will never stop writing good quality code. There are program authors, language authors that, when a new, language like Kotlin came out, right? So we have seen these languages keep coming up, right? Kotlin, Rust, and Java is already out there. C#. There are languages which have gone. I come from a time where I coded in COBOL, Fortran too, right? So when languages themselves are being specced differently, new owners, new authors are coming with new language paradigms, absorbing how the technology landscape is changing, right? Because the constraints that erstwhile were imposed by chips, right, and so on, are no longer there. So when there is an unconstrained world, new kind of languages can come in to solve new age problems. So when these authors are so dynamic, developers also against the spec are also going to be dynamic to churn out new coding paradigms, new best practices, which all need to feed back into the model, right? So hence I cannot dismiss developers' role to be trimmed. It may just amplify it. Developers might be pushed to be a lot more sharper, that all mundane things are already out there, right? I can just leverage it, which means get productive, leave the mundane things, repeatable things to ChatGPT kind of interfaces, treat it like a copilot key, get me the skeleton code base,
Sure.
right? Which is repeatable. Give me that, envelope. Let me focus on those parts which are more meaty and where I can amplify the, codification on it. So it's going to be a happy marriage, I would say. And it can only push us developers, engineers a lot more harder.
I think it will be a happy marriage as far as there is again the balancing act, right? That how much power you are giving to the thing which you are actually producing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where to stop, Beauty?
Yeah, and see, we can't dismiss these kind of technology advancements. We need to always embrace them in a productive way, give it space around you. As long as you are able to give space around you, that coexistence happens. As soon as we introduce friction, that's when, different, powerhouses do come in, right? And we cannot allow humans to be too powerful, or we cannot allow, these autonomous systems to be too powerful. Yeah, both of us need to feed it out of each other. Let the fictional part of it be in Netflix and Amazon series, that all that black magic that can happen when robots take control of all our systems. I mean, because we humans are codifying it. If we are, it just pushes us, like I said, to think harder, right? If we leave loopholes, it is left to be exploited, right? So let it be a happy marriage where both of us challenge each other and complement each other to get the best out of it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, Yuti, there are a couple of more questions from the audience. There's one on infrastructure. Why did you all decide to move to your own cloud infrastructure, and what's the plan for future?
Yeah, so I think it's again a story of multiple generations. We started off with our own private cloud right at the onset. At that point, complexity was not that high, scale was not that high, so we could run out of a single data center out of Mumbai. As soon as when we started thinking about Big Billion Day, we know that our game is upped, right? We need to be resilient. Flipkart site can never go down. Let's say if there is a complete power outage or some acute scenario, right? A disaster scenario, let's say in Mumbai, you cannot, given that kind of an excuse to the end consumer that, one data center is gone, and since we run and survive out of single data center, the window is, shut down. So that was the first phase, and 2014-15 timeframe, when we were pushed to be up leveling our trust markers to the end consumers. We started thinking about multiple data centers, and that was the first time when we seriously gave it a thought on should we go into public cloud. I'll tell you the nuances which did not work in our favor. And this is probably a generalized theme that many of the startup owners should understand, that even before going to a cloud provider, you need to characterize the DNA of your company, the DNA of your business, right? And if I look back in time around 2014-15, what was the DNA of the company? What was the business profile? We were talking about, for most part of the year, we are doing a BAU business at certain X, small variations here and there, but we were doing that kind of a, sale. Now during BBD, that X gets amplified into 30X, 40X, and so on, right? And sometimes it's unprecedented. So the true benefit of us going into public cloud would have been that solve for this spiky growth. Otherwise, what happens is you are trying to maintain an infrastructure and cost associated with it at 30x the consumption pattern throughout the year, which is not a good cost ROI, right? And at that point of time, that's way back dated in 2014-15, when we started talking to the traditional cloud providers, because the footprint itself was not that high in this Southeast Asia region, right? The conversations were more in the direction of, it was almost like a bargaining, right? We cannot budget for you suddenly spiking up, because to support this kind of a spike and with Flipkart kind of a volume and customer base, maybe for the cloud provider, that infra might be lying dormant because it will not be able to onboard that many clients, right? When Flipkart is not using it. So it was not very cost viable either for the cloud provider or for us. So that was one reason. But other reasons are more intrinsic, where we started to think about a lot more of micro optimizations, right? During Big Billion Day, a single click that you make on website, right, or an app, you just say buy now. Behind the scenes, the kind of data that is doing the talking, and that data gets amplified, right? There is some part of the data which is very small in size. Let's say the price, the inventory, right? Sometimes it's Boolean or singular number. But when you're rendering the product page, right, where there is so much rich information, there is image, there is description, there are so many facets to consider before buying a product, that payload is very high. And that is only for certain systems. We started setting up on network traffic within our handcrafted data centers in such a way that they are cost optimal, by the way, right? You cannot have fat pipes for every call. Let's say if there is a fat pipe connecting this system which sells out heaviest payload to the app ecosystem, while others are thin pipe. So these are the things that we actually did. We handcrafted our data center, our network topologies. We handpicked the kind of data storage that we would want. Where do we use SSD versus commodity hardware? We work with the chip providers, Intels, and so on, right? We even customized some of the chip designs around it, right? So we wanted specialized hardware, because we were able to understand our workloads. What is heavy duty, what is low throughput, and all kind of, when we put it out there and work with vendors, right, they are able to say, okay, what spec is compliant, what is not. So if you see, we went so deep that it made sense both for cost reasons and for workload optimizations to go with a handcrafted cloud. But that is the story around 2015. Right now, fast track to where we are now, and we always consider there would be an inflection point where we need to consider public cloud, right? We cannot live with it and live without it in a way. And it could be cost reasons, it could be even other reasons, like let's say if we in our private data centers, we get some GPUs, and we know that the life cycle of GPUs are very small, right? Every year you get a lot more new generation GPU devices, and the infrastructure is probably upping the game almost every year. And in our own data centers, you cannot keep on upgrading these hardware specs every year. It's very cost prohibitive. So there are so many compelling reasons for us to be on public cloud too. So I think we are at the inflection point where we are underway in a hybrid cloud strategy. Now it makes sense both for cost reasons as well as for the infrastructural reasons. But it did not make sense in 2015. So, to you, the point is understand your business, understand your workloads, and see if the cloud provider gives you that hardware, gives all of it at the right cost, understands your business variabilities, and helps you plan for it, right? So all of it comes together for us.
Got it. Super. Any last questions, guys? I know there's one on ONDC, but anything else? There's on cross-border as well. UT, you want to take some of these questions or any other topics you want to cover?
Yes, I think I'll probably quickly answer this part, and probably between us we can have few closing notes. So see, ONDC, the protocol itself, by the way, as an engineer, as an architect, I actually appreciate it. It's very simplified interface. It's all the things that are happening around India stack, I actually love them, because it's not about just pure play tech scaling and so on, right? The simplicity of the specifications allow for an ecosystem play. When UPI came into the play, right, the way it was conceptualized, and it's such a non-frictional interface that it was set up for adoption and for that kind of a population scale coverage. Similarly, with the ONDC backend protocols and all, these are pretty beautiful specifications. I think it is for the entire ecosystem to understand what it means, the semantics of it, whether it's big corporates or whether it's small businesses that can leverage the different network nodes, right? If you cannot, if as a small business, you cannot leverage, let's say, you cannot build your own supply chain. You need to depend on something, right? Let you solve for what your USP is. Let other ecosystem partners enable your business to thrive. And in that kind of a partnership model, these ONDC networks actually help you do that, right? And the way Kayla demonstrated that, by giving out that taxi app, right? Whatever was state government owned, very quickly they could convert it into a Uber, Ola equivalent kind of an app and give it out to the world, right? So it is as simple and beautiful as that. But everyone has to understand this role play. What does a big corporate like Flipkart, Amazon have a role in to play in here, because they control an entire ecosystem for themselves, right? Do they need that ecosystem play? Maybe not. But can they contribute to it? For sure. All right. So that is how I see it. I think it is for us to wait and watch and see how the network effect shapes this entire storyline.
Super. Any closing thoughts, or there's a cross-border? I think the drone one we can, ignore for now. We'll see how it plays out there. It's just too early.
Right. Yeah, so I think, top of the mind things for me are always about platformization, and we covered that part somewhere in the middle. For me, that's my DNA, right? I practice the art and science of it. Some things are very, very objective. Some things are almost like an artist with a brushstroke. He can do anything, right? So I try to practice both of it, and that story we can keep talking on and on. But one other augmenting construct and an important technology consideration is that technology is not about uh, picking up the right tech stacks. It's not just about creating the most beautiful looking platforms. It's not just about scaling it. It's an ecosystem play, right? There are many more things that, if not done well, sooner or later it will come back and bite you and stall you. And those elements are a bit softer in nature. What kind of tech talent are you investing in? At what time are you investing in it? Right? What kind of a tech culture do you build? What kind of an entrepreneurship model do you build? And how do you enable and empower these technology custodians on the floor, right? If these aspects are not thought through, then technology will at some point just die down to be just be an enabler and not allow you to create a differentiated story. Because if, a simple way of contextualizing it is, if the technology stakeholders, the people who code and systemize and sharpen the leverage of technology, if these are just consumers of us coming in, your executive just say that, can we deliver this feature? Can we deliver this capability? Can you do this? Can you do that? And as an incoming ask, technologists just keep on churning, the ask and, feeding it back as a, output. That machinery cannot thrive forever. What will be a beautiful story is when you also enable and empower these technologists on the ground to spin their own web of stories, saying that sometimes you also show us how you can unlock new business ideas. Show us the true potential of technology, right? Because we don't understand technology, we just know how to leverage technology, but you guys can unlock it, right? Maybe there are new age paradigms that are coming in. ChatGPT we talked about, blockchain we talked about. There are many more, right? So when you understand that a lot more deeply, maybe you are the best custodian of coming back and telling the executives that if you leverage technology in this way, maybe business can shape itself in a bit better. Maybe a new idea comes in, right? To do that, there are many rituals and practices that you should be having on the floor. First of all, enable this kind of a culture, empower these technologies to take decisions, give them seat at the table, right? Make them part of decision making, make them well versed with what the company objectives are, and let them go on that. It's a sense of belongingness to where the company is headed and how I can contribute. Once all of it is there, then bottom up, what will happen is new ideas will come in. new experimentations will happen, a lot of bottom-up innovations will happen, and that I believe is the best playground to disrupt. Otherwise, disruptions are always by design, by incidences, by copy, by momentum, but not through differentiations, right? So that's my closing thought, that technology is a lot more powerful if we truly leverage it in a intrinsically bottom-up manner.
Super. Thank you. Thank you, Uti. Thank you to all the attendees and Deblina and Renata and Matrix team for setting this up. Wonderful conversation, and we've sent a feedback form to the attendees. So please do send feedback for the session. Would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Yuti.